This is Abe Freetanzer from Awards Watch, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with Patrick Fabian about Better Call Saul. How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I knew that this was an exciting interview. It was going to be an exciting interview, and I want to make sure that no one watching is irresponsible enough to be tuning in here without having caught up on all the episodes of Better Call Saul that have aired so far.
Yes, absolutely. You know, if you haven't watched 601 through 607, first of all, shame on you. And second of all, you should find something else to do and then come back to this wonderful interview. That's my suggestion to you.
I always try to issue like a spoiler alert, but I'm wondering who's interested enough to watch this interview without being caught up.
I don't know, but I don't know if you've noticed, social media sometimes can be snarky and a little sharp, and people are still like angry at other people for posting, stuff that's going on, and I get that. I totally understand the idea of like the wave of like it airs here and then it airs there. But there's also something to the effect of like, we've waited 2 years for the final season of Better Call Saul, and we're going to talk about it. There's just no way we're not going to talk about it. So for those of you who are waiting for Netflix for next year, it's still going to be a wonderful show. But I'm afraid some of the cats will definitely be out of their bags.
Right. I was fortunate. I was very busy like when the mid-season finale aired, and so I didn't watch it for maybe a week and a half after, which is very irresponsible. But I managed not. People were worried about Kim. That was all I read. I didn't hear anything more, and certainly nothing related. So I still got that real impact. So when did you first know how Howard's arc was going to end?
Well, I mean, first of all, the story of my life. Everyone's worried about Kim. Oh, I love that, Rhea Seehorn. I found out before the season began. Vince Gilligan, Peter Gould, and Melissa Bernstein gave me the dreaded actor call of 3 producers calling saying, "Hey, call us back. We'd like to talk to you." And you're like, "Oh." And it was exactly that call, but mostly it was a courtesy call because they just said, we know you have a family. We know you commute back and forth to Albuquerque, and just know that you'll be commuting half as much this season, is what they basically said. That was the only detail I got, and which was good. And they said, sort of forget it immediately. So I did. And like, I've been on Better Call Saul long enough to know that you don't talk about Better Call Saul. It's like, we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Saul. My wife doesn't know what goes on. My kids don't know what goes on. I just keep it to myself. So that was easy. Although I got some backlash from said Rhea Seehorn, because when we finally read the episode where the event happens and Howard's demise begins, Ray and Bob, I guess, called Peter Gould and said, "Have you told Patrick yet?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we told him like 6 months ago." And Ray called me and she was like, "What? How could you not tell us that?" But I also thought, that's the way we've experienced the show. We didn't know what our arcs were going to be anyways from the beginning of one season to the other. And they were unfolded week to week as the scripts came out. And I think that really benefited a immediacy to what we were doing. I don't think, for me as an actor, it doesn't help me to know the end of the play necessarily, especially when I'm working in television, which I know is mixed metaphors, but you know what I mean.
Of course. Well, we'll come back to Howard's demise later. I'm curious about his origin, what relationship, if any, you had with Breaking Bad before the show, and what appealed to you about the role of Howard.
Well, I think I'm on record by saying I'm the guy who did not watch Breaking Bad. My wife was 9 months pregnant, and we were watching the pilot, and it finishes, and she's rubbing the miracle of life in her womb, and she turns to me and she goes, "Yeah, I'm not on board with this show." And so, that's what happened. We had one baby. I missed the first couple of seasons, and then we had a second baby. So during the glorious run of Breaking Bad, I was watching, Clifford the Big Red Dog and Super Y, and I'm very well versed in Clifford, by the way. So much so that by the time they finished their run, I hadn't seen a single episode. And it was one of those things where I saw it on the billboards and I had heard about it, but I really hadn't watched it, which ultimately I think benefited me when I went to audition for it, because I understood this was a big job, but I also understood in my mind that they were going to give this to a movie star or somebody who had a real big name. You know what I mean? Because I thought, I was going in because Sherry Thomas and Sharon Bialy and Russell Scott, with the casting agents, they also casted The Walking Dead. And I thought, ooh, they're like in season 4. Maybe I'll get like a 3-episode part and get eaten by a zombie. That's what I was going for. So the pressure was sort of off. After I got the job, of course, then I binged Breaking Bad. And I was like, what? Amazing. Then I got nervous. Like, I got the job and then I got nervous. Then I suffered for about No, 3 years, 4 years, assuming I would get fired every day.
Well, I do think I had the chance to speak with Michael Mando and Giancarlo Esposito also. Michael said he didn't watch Breaking Bad either, but they're very much involved in, I think, a lot of events that are linked to the Breaking Bad universe, whereas Howard's sort of a fresh start, and it feels like its own sort of different show that isn't really as much about Saul until recently. It's more about Jimmy.
Oh, yeah. Look, I've always thought that, what I am, and by the way, I've always watched the show like the fans. I've gone and worked on the show, and then I watch it on Monday night when it's finally built. And as the fans know, it takes a while for Saul to get made. And so by the time it rolls around, I'm sort of vaguely unsure of what I'm doing in the show. So it's kind of a fresh thing for me. But really, what always gets me is I'm watching a show because I'm in a show about lawyers that have some emotional problems. And then all of a sudden, we're out in the desert and there's gunplay. And I'm like, what's this part going on? You know what I mean? So I was always reminded how bifurcated Better Call Saul was. And yet the way they've managed to link those two worlds and make it a part of has been real. Look, the writers, any actor will tell you it's on the page or it's not. And if it's not on the page, you can't do anything with it, but it's on the page. The map is right there. These writers have really figured things out to an nth degree that really give us the roadmap to give you what you end up seeing, which is a gift without a doubt.
I also really liked the last episode. They'll start with Howard invoking Chuck, because I feel like they were always so in sync. And I honestly have forgotten all about Chuck. It's been so long. Like Michael McKean was so incredible, but like that's so far in the past. So much has happened since then. It was nice to be brought to that moment as Howard unknowingly was approaching his end.
I know. I mean, it's great, right? The symbolism of Chuck's overlooking the board, where I'm going to have my demise, where I gave him his demise, and we both end up with the same fate, basically because of the same guy. I mean, that's great synchronicity. I don't even think the writers thought about when they introduced Michael McKean. And let's take a minute and talk about Michael McKean. The mighty Michael McKean was so great to work with. He just elevated the show and took it in a different direction that I think even the writers were unsure that they were going to go. But it made his loss was so felt when we came back for season 4. And it's hung over Howard the entire time. And then literally, so the fact that he has to, explain to the young kid who that is. I mean, I was sort of angry. Poor actor. Very nice boy. I'm calling him a boy. He's probably 30, by the way. That's the old guy talking. This young boy was in there in the acting space. And I said to him, and I was like, Michael McKean. And he's like, oh, yeah, of course. But like when we were doing the scene, I was actually angry. I'm like, how could you be working here? And then I thought, who hired him? Did I hire this guy who doesn't know who this is? That's Chuck McGill. So it was great. It felt like a great sort of embrace of the ghost of McKean as I jumped off my ledge, And now I'm sounding like a theater boy as we jump off the ledge into our abyss.
Does that soda can trick really work?
Yeah, it does, as a matter of fact. Tom Schnauze's father taught it to him. And then the internet, of course, immediately started doing it. I'd say it's about a 40-60 rate for some people. I'm not there when they do it, so I can't say they did it wrong, but most people say it does work. And so I'm going to go with those folks.
I also was noting, I'm looking at what you're wearing there, and it's like, I'm more dressed up than you today, which is not what I expected, given Howard, except for that one scene where he's in the ring. I feel like he's always just wearing a suit, always very fancy.
It was my uniform. And that's, by the way, hats off to Jennifer Bryan, who designed that with the tie bar and the knit tie. And, that was my acting suit. I would put that on and, actors sometimes like to have like a secret. It's a game they have when they go into a scene. What's your secret? And you don't tell anybody. My secret always was when I walked into a scene, I always had this wonderful condescending thought of like, oh man, I'm wearing more than you make in a month. And it's the truth. And by the way, I think it was okay for Howard because he was predicated on what it looked like. The Jaguar, the tie bar, where we ate, how we ate, what happened, the country club. I mean, that's how he did business. That's how he went through the world. So that suit was so important. And the last time I took it off, I have to say, I was very, very sad. And to answer the question before it even comes, no, I didn't get to keep any of the suits. Why? Because they paid more for the suits than they paid for the guy in them. I can almost guarantee that.
Well, it seems like you get very into a lot of your characters' emotions and mindset. So did you enjoy the chance to get in the boxing ring and fire off a few punches?
It was great. I stood there with Bob and we were standing there. The set decorators had made this blank space into what you saw with the beautiful lighting by Steve Latecki, and Marshall Adams is our DP, shooting us like movie stars. And I'm standing there with boxing gloves looking at Bob Odenkirk. And I'm like, from the first scene we had in my boardroom where you came in and delivered the network, you shall atone speech, I wouldn't have predicted that we would have ended up here. And yet the writers made it work. And now we're standing here and you and I are about to box. And he's like, isn't showbiz grand? And I'm like, yeah. And I felt so lucky. I felt so lucky to have that moment. And it was ridiculous and great. Although I do want to point out, Bob, obviously much better shape. He's an action star. I don't know if you didn't know this. He's an international action star now. But I had to remind him by showing him the script that Howard wins. Howard wins in this one. I don't think he liked that.
Yeah, I saw Nobody. He can do some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. Well, so, Howard's downfall in that final episode is really just so spectacular. It's exactly sort of as Jimmy and Kim have choreographed it. And then that final scene is just so sudden and irreversible. And it feels like everything that they spent so long doing just wasn't worth it at all. Obviously he's lost his life, but how did you react when you found out the specifics?
Well, it reads like it plays. I'm reading the script. I'm like, oh, look at this up and down. That's crazy. This roller coaster ride. What's going on? And then you get to that final scene where I come back. You're like, oh, he's going to come back and say something. And then all of a sudden it just says, enter Lalo. And I was like, what? And then literally half a page later, script over, the end. You're like, oh. And to your point, it feels like the humiliation is complete when I'm in the scene with that wonderful Ed Begley Jr., right? Ed and I are in my office, and it's the end of the road. Doesn't even matter if I'm right. It doesn't even matter if my lunatic ravings are correct, and they are. Doesn't matter. We've lost. I have been humiliated, stripped naked in my own office. They've won. And it feels like in the show, that's it. That's what we've been driving at for this entire season. Guess what? He's gone. And then we go off somewhere else. I forget where. And then all of a sudden, there's a knock at the door. And I come in. And you're like, oh, well, he's got something more to say. And it's like, oh, he's really saying. And I think a lot of the things that Howard says in that scene are things that maybe the fans also have been maybe quietly voicing to themselves. Like, why are you doing this? Is it because I did this? And Howard gives voice to that. And he gives voice to the injustice of it all. And I'd like to say for all the failings that Howard does have as a human, he didn't necessarily deserve that. It seemed really over the top. But when he announces he's going to spend the rest of his life basically getting back at them, I'm like, that's what he comes over for. He comes back over to say, like, you got me. Oh, you got me good. But I'm going to get up and I'm going to marshal everything I've got. And I'm going to play the slow, low con on you and destroy you. And then, of course, Lalo enters. And it changes both of our perspectives, and talk about wrong place, wrong time. And I'm literally the consequences of their actions lying at their feet by the end of the episode. Tom Schnauz wrote a hell of a script, and being able to work with my friends like that and knock that out of the park was really, really fun.
Have you read fan responses to Howard's death?
I have, initially I sort of stayed off a little bit because I think even when I saw it, I was like, oh, Michael Mando called me. He said, hey, call me about 3 days after it airs. I'm like, why? He goes, because it feels different. And he was right. It did. I knew it was happening. We shot it was happening. I witnessed it happening when they aired it. And then it echoed with me in a very strange, weird, real way. And so I called him and he's like, hey, dead guy. I'm like, hey, dead guy. But the fans, I have to say, the fans were really supportive, basically, because I think the fans could see themselves as Howard for that moment of like, oh, that's how you can just be in the wrong place. And it happens that quick. And there's no amount of words to speak to take it back. It's just instantaneous. It's gone. And so that's what's so awful. Somebody sent me a link, which I didn't realize they had this. I guess the kids, I'll act like the old guy. I guess the kids are filming reactions as they watch stuff now on YouTube. It sounds like the package opening thing. I have little girls, so we went through a phase where we watched a bunch of people's hands open packages. I still don't get it. But the fan reaction thing was pretty cool. I saw people from all over the world, like with headphones, watching the final scene of 607 and their faces, and it was priceless. And I was really proud of the reaction. Some people literally just went into shock face and like didn't move for 3 minutes. Other people like fell out of frame. people screamed and ran around the room. So I tell you what, it was pretty satisfying to know that had that kind of impact, you know?
Wow. Yeah, no, it was definitely pretty shocking for me. And I think I had to move on to do something else right away. So I like still processing it. So it's nice to be able to revisit it now. I'm sure we could talk for several more hours about this, but I want to just ask you before I let you go, what's next for you?
Well, you know what? I'm working on the Gordita Chronicles, which is a half-hour show on HBO Max. It's going to premiere June 23rd, I believe. And I'm in about 5 or 6 of those episodes. It's about a Dominican family that comes to Miami in the 80s, told through the lens of the girl in the family. I work with Juan Cardina in it, and I play his boss. It's really fun. It's a complete sort of left turn from what Howard was doing. And then also I did a film with Andy McDowell called The Other Zoe. That'll be out on Amazon later in the fall.
Wonderful. And for that first one, what are you wearing? Wearing a suit again?
Yeah. You know what? If you look at my IMDb, I've been wearing a suit for about 20 years. So I don't think the suit's going to be shaken. No one's hiring me as the hippie next door anytime soon.
After they watch this interview, maybe they will. Who knows?
Hey, you never know.
Well, it's lovely to be able to speak with you, Patrick. Thanks so much and good luck in the future.
Thanks, Abe.